All right, good morning. It is September 9th, 2022. My name is Ed Nangle, and online today we've got Todd Hicks, we've got Ms. Pamela Sherratt, we've got Dr. Dave Shetler, we have Dr. Dave Gardner, we have Brandon Stitt, and we have Dr. Dominic Petrella. And this is going to be Turf Team Times Live, first one of the year. And what we're looking for is a presentation or a discussion following the updates that we get from the turf team. So leading that off, Dr. Dave Gardner, I believe you have a share screen and you want to give us an update on the weed science end of it.
Good morning, everybody. So I got an interesting email earlier this week, and these were the pictures that were sent to me of a unknown grassy weed. And the interesting thing about this is that, well, this is something that was planted on purpose, but as an ornamental. So this is Pesticide Testing, which is fountain grass, which people plant because it's pretty and they use it as a landscaping plant. But unfortunately, this plant has shown the ability to self-seed. And if you plant it in proximity to turf, then you end up having this. And unfortunately, unlike most of the rest of our ornamental grasses, this will survive repeated mowing, and we have no non-selective herbicides for it. So just something to consider if you have ornamental plantings of Pennisetum or fountain grass in proximity to turf, be on the lookout for this. Or, you know, the best strategy, of course, is to enjoy this species surrounded by concrete or some other hardscape. I'm getting ready to start a trial looking at winter annual weed control. And I'm saying this because if I'm getting ready to start the trial, what I'm trying to say is that this is a good time for you to attempt to control winter annuals if you have had a problem with these in the past. So things like chickweed and henbit and purple dead nettle, or our newer species, hairy bittercress, if you have an issue with any of these weeds. Generally speaking, pre-emergence herbicides in September tend to give better control than post-emergence herbicides in November, which tend to give better control than attempting to control post-emergence next spring when these are all big and attempting to flower and set seed. Then they become really, really difficult to control with most of our conventional chemistry. So if you've had a history of winter annual weeds on a particular site, now's the time to think about making an application of a pre-emergence herbicide to maybe ward that off. That said, if this is in an area where you've done some recent seeding, don't put down a pre-emergence herbicide. Hopefully you put down some mesotrione with the seeds when you did that establishment, and that should do an adequate job of preventing those winter annuals from coming in this fall. Ed, that's what I have for today.
Dr. Gardner, much appreciated. Dr. Petrella, on seed selection, I believe you got an update for us.
So I want to do a bit of food for thought of how we can adjust seeding rates to make sure we get good establishment. And a lot of this comes back after you go ahead and seed, and a couple weeks later, and you're like, oh crap, I should have had better coverage. And sometimes it goes back to how much seed you actually put out. So we'll talk about how we can adjust seeding rates. So here are our general seeding rates that we use for cool season species. So tall fescue, 79 pounds per 1,000 square feet. Our fine fescues, 3 to 6 pounds per 1,000 square feet. Ryegrasses, 79 pounds per 1,000 square feet. Our smaller seeded species then 1 to 2 pounds per 1,000 square feet. So seeding rates have been quote unquote optimized for seed size. Okay, it all goes back down to what you see over here is the number of seeds per pound, because we want a certain number of seeds over a given area. Okay, the issue is that within a cultivar, we can actually have some pretty big differences in seed size. I'm going to show you that. So we can actually be better on how we put out seed when we get a little bit more information from our breeder, or even we can actually provide some more information on some cultivars. So why do we adjust seeding rates? So number one, we can do it on purity, and that's related to weed seed or even mixture. So I'll show you a label and what purity is. What I'm going to really focus today is on seed size, but also percent germination. So here are a bunch of different fine fescues. This is data from University of Minnesota from Andrew Holman. So all these are fine fescues. We generalize fine fescues. We can put them down from 4 to 5 to 6 pounds, 1,000 square feet. The issue is we got big differences in seed size. So here's a chewing fescue in the top left that has extremely tiny seeds. Down right below it, we have one down here, and chewing fescue has pretty large seeds. That can lead to the need for 1 to 2 to sometimes 3 pounds difference. Okay. And that's a saving that can be changing money or changing cost, but also simply you can see poor establishment because you might not put enough seed out. So we want a certain number of seeds per 1,000 square feet for optimum coverage after we seed. So the way we do it is we look at having 2 pure live seeds per centimeter square. Okay, that equals out to about, we want 1,900 seeds that are going to germinate per foot squared. Okay, so our foot square, we want about 1,900, you can say 2,000 seeds per foot squared. So seed size will impact that. So smaller seeds, we will need less poundage per foot squared. Larger seeds, we will need higher poundage per foot squared. So we can go back to this picture. This Chewings fescue that's tiny, we will need a lower seeding rate. So it might be 3 pounds per 1,000 square feet. Versus this Chewings fescue at the bottom, larger seeds, we're going to need a higher seeding rate. So I'll show some information, but you can request information from the producer or you're buying seed is what the weight or how many seeds per pound. Okay, and I'll show you can back calculate to adjust your seeding rates. So here's a label from Raptor LS Tall Fescue that we recently purchased, so we can look at what goes in the seeding label that you can get information from. Number one's the percentage of pure seed. So this was 99.86% Raptor LS Tall Fescue. 0% crop seed, 0% weed seed. So this goes and gets tested after it's harvested from the farmers. This also has 0.14% inert matter. That inert matter is generally chaff. Okay, so it's going to be some stem tissue. Sometimes it can be empty or non-filled seed. And then over here on the right, we also have the percent germination. So this has a 98% germination rate. That means pretty much everything we prep is going to germinate. The other things we want to look at are the lot number and where it originates from. And that's because if you have an issue with your establishment, you can go back to your company, give them the lot number, and they can go back to see if other people have also had problems. So we've had people in the past where they have seeded tall fescue and it ends up being annual ryegrass. Okay, so having that number will allow you to go back and make to find out what could have been wrong. So here I have 2 examples of some tall fescues. Both of these are tall fescues. On the left, we have tall fescue A, really large seeds. On the right, we have tall fescue B, relatively small seeds. Okay, same species, different cultivar, different size seeds. And that means that per pound, you have different amounts of seed. So on the left, 100 seeds for this cultivar are 260 grams. And on the right, 100 seeds of this was 180 grams. Okay, well, what's that mean? That means to get to our 2,000 seeds per square foot, on the left, we'll have to put 10 pounds down per 1,000 square feet of this cultivar. Where on the right, we're putting out 8.5 pounds per 1,000 square feet. So 1.5 pounds less of seed. So if we seeded the one on the left at 8 pounds, you might not get optimum coverage when you seed. If you seed the one on the right at 10 pounds, so you're overseeding it, you're wasting seed. But also, if we have too many plants out and you overwater, you have a greater chance of getting disease. Okay. So I want to show that here with some more fine fescues. So fine fescues really vary in seed size. So on the top left, we have our optimum amount of seed, about 1,800, 2,000 seeds per 1,000 square foot. And we have a couple of different strong creep and red fescues. This first one, PST 4BEN, about 450,000 seeds per pound. And down at the bottom, this DLF in red, 280,000 seeds per pound. Same species, very, very, very different size of seeds. So we can look at how many pounds of seed we will need to get that optimum seeding rate. So that larger seeded one, the smaller seeded one, 4.1 pounds per 1,000 square feet for optimum seeding rate. Whereas that larger seeded one, 6.4 pounds. So about 2 pounds difference. That's a lot of seed, and that can be a lot of money if you're establishing large areas. Okay. Last but not least is adjusting for germination. So we looked at this seed label. This germinates at 98%. I will say that every time I've done germination tests, they are never similar to the germination rate listed at the label. That's not a knock against anybody. But this seed, that germination percentage is determined out in Oregon or out in Minnesota when they get the seed tested. You can get seed dying within that period for how it's stored. Okay. So maybe 1 out of 10 times, it's pretty similar to the germination rate based on my experience. Okay. So you can actually easily measure percent germination. Okay. Or we can do it for you if you request it. Okay. So we put out 50 seeds or whatever on a little plate, and we can measure germination after a set amount of time. So after 7 days, 14 days, 21 days, we can see how many seeds have germinated. We might get some seed that rots. Okay. Or you might just have dead seed. So if we have 75% germination, we might have a seeding rate adjusted. So if we put out 5 pounds, 0.75 pounds, we'd actually put 6.7 pounds of seed out. Okay. So we can adjust based on germination percentage. So just as a summary, why do we adjust seeding rate? 1, to save money. Okay. But to put out the optimum amount of seed for optimum turf cover so we don't get weeds, but also so we don't get disease because you might have too many plants. And that's all I got.
Dr. Petrella, killing us with the science once again. Nicely done, sir. Pamela Sherratt.
So good morning, everyone. I have a quick question for Dominic before I start, for Dr. Petrella. So years ago in a conference, I heard Dr. Leah Brillman state that for faster germination with some of these Kentucky bluegrass varieties, seed size mattered, that the larger seeds, the larger the seed, the more chance they had of germinating and the quicker they would establish. Have you done any work with that? Any observations on that?
Anecdotally, I'd 100% agree. You'll see varieties that are stated as fast germinators. The seeds are double to triple the size of your average Kentucky bluegrass. And it's generally because they have a larger endosperm, which is energy reserved, so you can get better and quicker germination. So yeah, 100% agree.
Okay. And when somebody in the audience asked how they would get that list, she said, you just have to ask me. So.
Well, that's the thing is you could easily ask. That information is available. You just have to ask.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Dr. Petrella. I just had one observation, just to keep an eye on moisture management. I know we've had some pretty big rain events going on. Of course, now's the time that we're renovating. I've got 2-week-old Torfescue out there right now that's doing real well. But even though we might get a huge rain event on a Tuesday, we can still have seed drying out a couple of days later with it being on the surface. So just an observation for me, for those people out there doing renovations, keep an eye on the moisture. Just because it rained a couple of days ago doesn't mean we shouldn't keep up on the syringing cycles for at least another couple of weeks. And then I have a question for Dave Gardner. So on these new seedings, what is the standard sort of practice if they wanted to put a 3-way broadleaf weed control out? Are we looking at 3 mowings of the cool season grasses, or what's sort of a standard piece of advice you would have?
Just about all of the labels say that you should wait until the plots have been mowed 3 times. Yes, as you say. There is some variation, so always check the label with the particular product that you're using, but that is a good general rule of thumb. And conveniently, that will end up being about the time that we recommend that people spray for weeds to optimize control anyway, which is late October to early November.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Dr. Nangle.
Pamela, thank you so very much. Dr. Shadler, what kind of pestilence do you from the insect world?
Actually, what I'm getting reports of right now, a lot of people, especially in the lawn care, as you're mowing or walking across the lawn, you can see dozens to even hundreds of these little sort of tan colored moths flying around. They're obviously sod webworms. If you can get down on your hands and knees and look at them a little bit closer, you'll notice that they have these really fluffy palps. Those are part of the mouth parts that stick out in front of the head. They also typically will have a silver or gold band on the tips of the wings, which are some of the scales that are on those. These are what we call the vagabond sod webworms. They come out every year, just like clockwork. Usually the first 2 to 3 weeks of September is when they emerge. As far as we can tell, they have 1 generation per year. The larvae typically feed in late fall and early spring, and then they go dormant for the entire summer as a pupa remaining in the soil. So when these larvae are feeding, our turf grasses are at their most rapid growing situation. So we've never been able to document any kind of damage, even on the shortcut turf of golf course greens and tees from the vagabond sod webworm. So they're just a nuisance. Yeah, sometimes you got to talk to your clients. The clients are really weird. I remember when I was back in Pennsylvania, had a homeowner that called me up and says, I've got these millers all over my lawn. And I go, well, you know, is that different from the Schultzes or whatever? And no, Miller moths. And I go, oh, Miller moths. Well, why are you worried about them? Well, I hang the clothes out on the clothesline and I'm afraid that their larvae eat my clothes. And I'm going, okay, here we go. And the bottom line is that the caterpillars only eat turf grass blades. And if the grass is rapidly growing, you're not going to see any damage from that. Another nuisance pest that we're seeing right now, at least in central Ohio, it was pretty spectacular. I think even Dave Gardner got out to see them this week, is that we have a little black wasp. I consider it a little black wasp. To most people, it's a big hairy black thing with it's got a sort of a reddish orange band on the tip of the abdomen with some yellow spots on it. This is Scola dubia, and it is the parasite of the green June beetle grub. And so if you've got a lot of them around, what that meant is that you had a good population of green June beetles. They're just nature's parasites. They'll dig down the soil, sting the grub to kind of paralyze it temporarily. While the grub is paralyzed, the wasp will lay an egg, attach an egg to that grub. And then in another few days, that egg will hatch out and the wasp grub will eat the white grub over the next month or so. So it's kind of a gory story, but it's, you know, as an entomologist, it's fun to me knowing that this biological thing is going on. Scola dubia can sting, but are only going to do so if you try to pick up one. And again, half of the ones that I saw were males. They don't have a stinger, and half of the bigger ones were the females. So again, if these things are cruising around over people's lawns, just try to explain to them that it's nature's biological control. Leave them alone and they'll leave you alone. Also, this is the time where turf should be recovering quite well. We've had cool nights. We've had enough rain. And especially in the lawn care, again, I'm getting reports that people are saying, well, some of this Kentucky bluegrass isn't recovering. Is that billbug damage? And I said, did you do the tug test? Well, what do you mean? Well, wherever that turf is still brown, grab a hold of those stems, pull them out. If they come out really easily and some of the stems are filled with that little sawdust-like frass material left from the billbugs, yeah, you had a second generation of billbugs. But if you don't see that, it's probably something else going on. And we are seeing patches of Kentucky bluegrass that just called it quits this summer. And Todd will probably talk a little bit more about that also, but it's not necessarily because you had billbugs. I really need that fresh-filled stems to know that, yes, it was billbugs. And we are seeing a second generation over much of Ohio. Well, I think I've taken enough time. I was going to initially talk about planning for the annual bluegrass weevil treatments early next spring. If you are a golf course superintendent and you've detected the annual bluegrass weevil, again, come to the OTF conference and show, and we'll give you all the information that you need to do the early season sampling and management of that weevil early next spring. Thanks, Ed, and the rest of the team. That's all I've got.
Thanks, Dave. Todd Hicks, you got an update on fungal disease and pestilence?
Morning, everybody. just the normal kind of year, this time of year, dollar spot is really chewing away at golf courses if they have not treated or they've got gaps in their window. If you do have areas that you're not treating, remember you're leaving inoculum there next to your stuff you're trying to protect. So if you got the money and or product, it might help you to go ahead and treat those areas. That's going to cut down on the incidences on the areas you're trying to protect. The other thing we're seeing on golf courses is it's time of the year that everyone's making holes, solid holes, hollow tine, whatever they're doing. So they're putting some stress on their golf courses, and people are seeing some weird things pop up. That's normal for this time of year, folks. It's been a long, hard summer. Grass is in not good shape. Roots are very shallow. And unfortunately, a lot of our grass growers associate cool weather with great growing conditions, which normally that's true. But if you dig down in the soil, like Dave Shetler talked about, a lot of people are a lot drier than they think they are. These bright sunny days with these light breezes dry up turf quicker than anything out there. So even though it's cool and the grass is trying to recover, things are drying out a lot worse than people assume. So always dig down and check that out. So we're still seeing the fairing pop up a little bit, usually after the coring. Anthracnose is still a possibility, depending on how much you stress it out. On high cut turf, lawn care, athletic turf, rust is still out there. Leaf spot is still thumping away, depending on how moist you are. And we're still hearing reports of red thread, something that usually is done by June, is still in people's backyards coming up if you've got high cut turf and it's staying moist. So funguses are very active. Just because it's nice and cool doesn't mean they all quit. So if you can treat, if not, look at your cultural practices and try to get that stuff knocked out before we head into the winter.
Thanks, Todd. Yeah, we're starting to see a resurgence of activity, and red thread never leaves us alone in certain spots in north central Ohio. It's an interesting problem. Okay, I think all of the turf team have given their updates. Brandon Stitt at the farm.
Yeah, so we are going to be renovating a row, just about a little over a half acre of bentgrass green site. We'll be coring out the row and installing a sand-based system with the help of OTF and some other partners. So looking forward to that, having some new types of bentgrass out here, new cultivars to look at, whether it be for disease, rolling studies, drought stress on sand-based systems. So hopefully a lot more new research on sand-based systems for next year's field day and any other research going forward. And then just renovating a lot of high cut turf around here. We have some long-term tall fescue low input trial going in with Dr. Petrella, and a few other areas renovating for hopefully get some leaf spot on some ryegrass areas as well. So we are gonna have a lot of seed in the ground this fall and getting ready for next season.
Thank you, Brandon. Sounds like a lot of activity going on, and I would say on our side of the campuses, we have activity going on that way too with our new bentgrass green, and we're looking to complete some of those other establishments with Dr. Petrella's trials. A couple of final updates. The scholarship outings are coming up. So the OTF one is earlier October, and then the ATI scholarship outing is mid-October. So if you see opportunities to get involved, we would love for you to help us out, to help students out, right? That's ultimately the focus of all these things. And there are 2 fun days out for anyone that's attended. And if you've got questions, feel free to reach out. So with that, I'm going to now open it up to the audience. Now, I had one question earlier on in the week, and I see that the attendee is here, but I'm not sure if they want me to ask the question. Okay, so the question is, to start us off, apologies now till I find it. Oh, sugar. And that's my bad. Has anybody else got another question they want to ask before I get there?
Hey, Ed, I'm on. I can ask
Okay,
it.
all right. Okay.
So my question is that I've used IBDU for a winter fertilizer, kind of a dormant feed, late season for many years, and it's getting harder and harder to find it. And when I do, what I have found, it's almost 45 or 50% more in price than it was before. So it's really expensive. So what are some of my other options for that almost a dormant fertilizer for the winter on putting greens?
I think Dr. Gardner might be the one, but I do want to clarify, Dennis, when you say almost dormant, can you give me a little more clarification? Is there still growth on
Well,
top?
typically what we do is when we get ready to put our snow mold down, we usually put that fertilizer out at that time and then get the snow mold control on, and then go ahead and do the really, really heavy top dressing, and done for the winter with it.
Okay, all right. Dr. Gardner.
I would say probably the most ideal substitute would be a short or medium chain methylated urea product that's designed to release over a 1 to 2 month period when it's applied, spring or summer. So I like Neutralene, Nitroform, something like that, but that might release slower than what you're intending. Ed and I were talking about this yesterday too, that you could consider just straight urea, but I think that's going to release quicker than what you are looking for. So I think a short chain methylated urea product is going to be probably your best course of action here, or maybe even consider like Milorganite.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that? We will take questions through chat and via microphone, folks, so start firing them. This is your opportunity to make us look silly.
Ed, I had a question come in over email while we've been on Turf Team Times, and it
All
was
right.
it was in regards to controlling creeping bent grass. And the standard recommendation to selectively control creeping bent grass is to use Mesotri on 3 applications, but unfortunately, you're supposed to start that August 15th, apply that every 3 weeks, with the last application being on or about September 30th, and that's when you put down your new seed. It's a little late to do that now. So the question becomes, if the bent grass is just a nuisance and you want to get rid of it, but you don't need to overseed those areas, you can still do the mesotrione program, 3 applications, 3 weeks apart, 5 ounces per acre for each application. But if you have to do overseeding in those areas because the patches of bent grass are too large, that's not going to work well, because you'd be throwing down your grass seed October 21st, which is a bit late for most of our amenity turf grasses that we're seeding. So then the strategy would probably more appropriately be to just use good old-fashioned glyphosate and then mow it short and slit seed into those areas.
Sounds right to me. Any other questions come across, folks? We're here for you. Something you've seen this summer that caused you consternation. I will tell you, this is more on a personal note. I had somebody do work. I did not have anybody do work. Somebody in the neighborhood I live in had work done by one of the cable companies. They left a hole for an extended period of time last winter. And the contractor that was finally brought in by the cable company, it looks like that they've got quackgrass in their mix. And so there's a problem, because it's in my tree lawn and I'm really annoyed. That's something I would ask people to really give consideration to when they're buying seed. I know the price of seed has been expensive, but at the same time, putting in a noxious weed or invasive weed into a seed mix really isn't justifiable. Folks, we are here for you. Please.
One time, Ed, I had great success taking quackgrass out of dormant Kentucky bluegrass, but that was with sulfurfuron, marketed as Certainty, which is now no longer recommended for use on cool season turf, because that's the same product where I selectively removed the not dormant Kentucky bluegrass from a stand of crab, dandelion and white clover. So yeah, there's not good options for selective control of quackgrass.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate that. That made my day. All right, question on the chat. Best selective control for Dallas grass.
Dallas grass or field pass Paleum, about the same year that we first discovered that weed in Ohio was the year that Topramazone or Pilex was released. And it was almost like, I'm not going to say industry conspiracy theory, but it's like, oh, look, a new weed for Ohio. And oh, look, we've got the perfect herbicide to control it. But seriously, Topramazone is the product for you. The thing about that is that it's a tropical grass. Normally those are annuals, think crabgrass, for example, that have to come from seed every year. Dallas grass and field pass Paleum can persist as perennials. So there's below ground structures that make that plant a perennial. You'll get good control of the top growth at this time of the year, but then go back next April. And if you've got big fat leaves poking out of the ground that look much bigger than a seedling leaf, that's the pass Paleum attempting to reestablish itself from those vegetative structures. And so you might need another application of Topramazone at that time. But Topramazone by itself, 1.5 fluid ounces per acre, is the recommendation.
Talk the guy. Todd, just 1 point. Did you come across any new products that kind of that impressed me?
One more time, Ed, I couldn't hear you.
Sorry, I muted myself. I was saying, did you come across any products this summer that kind of you're like, hey, that's something of interest and it was new to you?
No, there wasn't a whole lot in the new stuff come out besides some number compounds, unfortunately, that I don't know what they are. So the future looks bright to have some more tools in the tool chest. But I did notice a lot more superintendents are using these second and third generation DMIs. For the longest time, the DMIs just kind of, you used them in the springtime and everybody quit because they were scared of the reactions in stressful weather and the heat and so forth. But the DMIs have come on strong, and some of them are very, very good. 21 days of holding back dollar spot, and they work really well on brown patch, and they are being used very effectively for anthracnose. So when I've had several superintendents that talk about having these stress-related diseases after they core aerate, and a lot of them before they aerate are calling me and going, hey, what should I put out? And I'm like, you have one of those new DMIs, you might want to throw that one out there because it covers such a broad band, broad spectrum of diseases. So that's been something good to see, because for too long everybody's been relying on either chlorothalonil or one of our SDHIs, and I think the SDHIs are being pounded to death. So it's nice to see some of the other families finally being utilized more effectively.
Good stuff. Thank you. I will say I noticed there's a couple of products where they've added not to name a product, they've added a PR protein type material to it. And as a contact, I thought it improved activity past 14 days, where I was like, that's kind of impressive. Okay, we've had some questions, and man, one of them is a hand grenade. First one, how to tell the difference between bentgrass and Poa trivialis? Pam.
Well, Poa trivialis is I've still got it dormant right now. It's still pretty dormant in my yard. It has a lime green color. The bent grasses tend to be more of a blue gray color. The Poa trivialis is obviously folded, lime green in nature, boat-shaped tip, with it being in the Poa family, very shallow rooted, which of course bent grasses too.
I have visual aids.
I guess, I'm sorry.
I have visual aids if that would help.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
Of course, Dave, you would.
Here.
It has a sheath like an onion skin.
Yep.
Which is hard to describe without the visual. So if you have a visual of that, Dave, that would be great.
So both of them have a tall membranous ligule, and both of them grow by thin stolons, but the rough bluegrass has a boat-shaped tip. Green pea bentgrass is pointed. The rough bluegrass has a folded vernation and a midrib, whereas creeping bentgrass is rolled in the bud shoot and it has no midrib, but it has very coarse leaf venation versus the relatively smooth leaf, excepting for the midrib on the rough bluegrass.
Yes.
Dave, did you text this off your own phone just so you could be showing how prepared you were?
Yeah, it's a conspiracy. Yes.
Okay, all right.
Hey, one thing to add, based on my experience, ID and Poa Triv, even though Dave showed the ligule, bentgrass and high cut always has a longer ligule than Poa Triv.
Mhm.
If you got a massive white ligule, it's bentgrass. That Poa Triv it's pretty small.
Wow, disagreement. All right, the next thing among scientists, of course. What is opinion on liquid aeration products? Now, if I'm correct in what this question is pointing towards, is products that are claiming to put oxygen into the soil. Is that kind of where this question is coming from?
I believe.
Because I've come across, yeah, there's a couple of these products running around. Dr. Gardner.
Well, the nice thing about pesticides having to be registered is that they require testing in order to go onto the market, which is somewhat of a guarantee that they actually do something when you make an application. In contrast, a lot of the other products that aren't registered by the government, they might work, they might not. They might work at some times of the year, they might not at other times of the year, or on certain soil types, but not others, or on certain species of grass, but not others. We don't know. We have no data. Also, these companies tend to not do any testing with universities because they don't have to in order to get the product registered. So it's just one of those, as with everything, if you're going to do it, try it out, but make sure you leave a test strip. Okay, so, like I can't tell you the number of times that I've been somewhere and somebody applies something and they think that it worked great. And I'm like, where's the area where you didn't put it down to make sure that the product that you just spent all this money on actually did something for you? And they're like, So try it if you want to, but make sure you have a test strip.
Todd, I see you are wanting to add to this.
I was just going to add that probably 70 to 75% of the samples I received this year, which was a pretty heavy year for samples, were clearly problems with organic layer and thatch, because over the last 10 years, superintendents went from bookending their core aeration in spring and fall to only once a year, to some of them are totally doing away with core aeration, and they're getting a lot of buildup in the soil. And I think finally in a year like this year, where we had the heat very, very early and got really dried out, it was causing a lot of problems either with root growth. And then later in the year when the rain came back, algae bloom was awful. And everybody was worried I've got some sort of disease. They were spraying everything in that they had, trying to control it. And when you look under the scope, it was just every leaf was covered with algae, and it all was due to organic layer and thatch control, whether it was chemical control or not doing anything. I think we need to start sending that message out there that we need to get back into pulling cores to get rid of organic and thatch. Because I think we got away with it for a long time, and it's finally catching up with folks, and especially in a year like this year.
Todd, I would completely concur, and that's part of the reason that we're putting that research, the research green up in Worcester, is particularly with these new cultivars. I've seen both anecdotal evidence from superintendents and research data to show that even at low rates of nitrogen, the organic matter is still creeping up. And that is judicious top dressing followed on with that. So it's somebody who has all the money in the world, and they still were climbing back past 3% after about 7 years. And they were down at 1.3 pounds of N per year on his greens. So I think that's an absolute valid point, and we are going to take a look at this. We did have a question on coated grass seed from graduate Corey Pangborn. So nice little open-ended question, Mr. Pangborn. What are your thoughts on coated grass seed? Has any work being done at OSU? Pamela, grass seed and coated grass seed in sports turf?
I have not seen any benefits to germination rate or establishment speed.
Dr. Dr. Petrella, sorry, anything on your end?
Yeah, what's up, Corey? Long time no see. So if there's pesticide or fertilizer in the coating, so like in the ag world, coated seed usually has like methanoxam for ppm control or some fert, there might be some benefit. The issue with the coating is that it increases seed weight. Therefore, you'd actually need to add more seed. So a lot of coatings, you end up getting less poundage of seed per pound if they have a coating like Pam was talking about for soil retention. So I've seen no data that shows that coated seed for moisture retention improve germination. If you use them though, you got to make sure you add more seed because you have less seed per pound.
Yes, and in the larger seeded species that I worked with last year, it's about 50% more.
So in a way, you're paying more for less seed.
Great,
Okay.
thanks, guys.
Thank you, Corey. All right, any other questions, folks? Crabgrass. Okay, Michael Gessner has told us he's fighting crabgrass. Dave, this time of the year for crabgrass, Dave Gardner, anything else you can recommend doing?
At this time of year, the crabgrass should, in some cases, start to naturally be browning out, but some of the later germinating crabgrass is just now coming to, seed heads are being produced. You should be able to control those areas pretty easily just with quinclorac. You can also use topramazone or mesotrione, but on the difficult times of the year like July, I usually recommend combinations of quinclorac with either mesotrione or topramazone, a half a rate of each. But at this time of year, just quinclorac by itself would be the quickest and easiest way to get rid of that.
There was a slight follow on there. What about spring, Dave, as far as maybe rates of dimension, things like that, upping the rate, anything else?
In those areas, particularly if you weren't able to get rid of the crabgrass before it seeded out, you could consider increasing the rate of dimension to its maximum and then also put that out as late as possible. Remember, dimension has activity post-emergence on 1 to 2 leaf stage crabgrass. And so, if you went out sometime between April 15th and May 1, that would make it more likely that you would get good season-long control just on that area.
But Dave, that's not a good business model. So what do we do before we make that pesticide application? My recommendation is put out some iron to make the grass nice and green, charge for the visit. Dave, anything you can do?
Well, yeah, there's that.
Right. We don't always fit in the business world, folks. We're just telling you the best way to use the product. Is there any other questions? Okay, that garnered a thank you. No problem, Michael. All right, folks. I think we're going to wrap it up if we don't have any more questions. If there are anything that pops to mind, if there is anything that pops to mind, we are going to probably go to 2 weeks for the Turf Team times for the next 3 or 4 iterations. If there is anything, like I said, email us and we will cover it. This will be up on our YouTube channel sometime today. We'd like to thank everybody for their time, and we will talk to you all soon. And thank you, John. We didn't fall on our faces.